I had just stepped off the plane after saying goodbye to my husband forever when I sent a message to my family's group chat. I'm back from Ethan's memorial. Can someone pick me up from the airport? My sister Leah replied within seconds. We're busy at Dad's will reading. Then my mother, Janet, sent her own message. You weren't getting anything anyway. A photo appeared on my phone. She was smiling, holding up the deed to my house like it was a prize she'd won. My heart pounded, but I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. I typed 2 words, no worries. I hit send because what they didn't know was that the house they were holding the deed to wasn't theirs to take. The rain was falling hard when I stepped out of the terminal, blurring the taxi lights into long streaks of gold across the wet pavement. My suitcase wheels rattled against the uneven sidewalk as I made my way toward the pickup zone. I kept my black dress on from the memorial because I didn't have the energy to change. My hair was damp from the drizzle that had started back in Ethan's hometown and seemed to have followed me here. I was 37 years old, a widow of just 3 weeks. My husband, Ethan Shaw, had been the only person who ever made me feel truly safe. We met in the most ordinary way. He came into the bookstore where I worked, looking for a travel guide for a trip he never ended up taking. He had a gentle confidence, a way of making people feel like they mattered. He grew up in a working-class family, nothing like the polished, status-driven world I was raised in. My parents, especially my mother, never approved of him. She thought he was a good time, not a long-term investment. I married him anyway. We built our life together slowly. A small house, worn but full of warmth. A garden he planted with his own hands. A safe place where I could finally breathe without judgment. That house became our sanctuary, the one thing in my life that wasn't dictated by my family's opinions. My own family had always been complicated. My father, Henry Benton, was a man of few words, but his silence was rarely neutral. It was a tool, a way of showing disappointment without having to say anything. My mother, Janet, was the opposite. Her words could cut deep, and she knew exactly where to aim. My younger sister, Leah, learned from the best. She was the golden child, always agreeing with my mother, always making sure she was in the right rooms at the right times. I was the one who moved away, who made choices they didn't understand or approve of. When Ethan got sick, I told them. I sent the messages, made the calls. They didn't visit. My mother claimed she couldn't bear to see me like that, which sounded almost compassionate until she added, "Besides, you made your bed." Leah sent one text. "I hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything." She never followed up. The memorial was in Ethan's hometown, 3 states away. It was small but full of love. His friends from high school told me stories I'd never heard. His aunt pressed my hands in hers and whispered, "He adored you, Claire. You were his home." I flew back alone, carrying the weight of goodbye in every step. I knew my father's will was being read this week. I hadn't planned to go. My relationship with him had been fractured for years, and after Ethan's death, I had no space left for another round of my family's politics. Still, some small part of me hoped they'd reach out, if only to check on me. When my plane landed, I pulled out my phone and sent the message to the family group chat. I'm back from Ethan's memorial. Can someone pick me up from the airport? It wasn't a demand. It was a simple request. I thought maybe, just maybe, one of them would show up. Leah replied first. We're busy at Dad's will reading. No condolences. No how was the service. Just a reminder that they were together, and I was not part of whatever mattered to them. Then my mother's message arrived. You weren't getting anything anyway. My fingers tightened around my phone. I didn't know what she was trying to provoke. Anger, sadness, humiliation, but she got none of it. Seconds later, a photo came through. My mother, in her perfect red lipstick and pearl earrings, holding the deed to my house. She was grinning like a woman who had just won a battle. I stood there under the airport's flickering awning, rain dripping onto my shoulders, and stared at the image. My chest felt tight, but my mind was steady. That house had been Ethan's and mine. We had poured our savings into it, painted every wall, fixed every leak, and now, according to her smug little photo, it was theirs. I typed 2 words, no worries, and I meant it. It would be easy to tell this part of the story as if I was devastated in that moment, but the truth is different. Ethan and I had planned for this, not because we expected him to die, but because he knew my family. He'd seen the way they operated, how property and money were their favorite weapons. He had a habit of protecting me before I even knew I needed protecting. The rain turned heavier, soaking the edges of my dress, but I stayed where I was for a moment longer, letting the cold ground me. People rushed past, dragging luggage, calling out to drivers, living their own small dramas. I stood still, holding my phone, feeling the storm outside match the quiet storm inside me. I waved down a taxi, loaded my suitcase into the trunk, and gave the driver my address. It wasn't time to say anything to them yet. Not Leah, not my mother, not anyone. They thought they had won something. They thought the will reading had given them power over me. As the taxi pulled away from the airport, I glanced at my phone one last time. My mother had sent another message to the group chat. "You should start packing." Leah reacted to it with a thumbs up. I smiled, not because I found it funny, but because I understood something they didn't. They were busy celebrating. They were too distracted to wonder why I wasn't panicking. That was good. The longer they underestimated me, the better my position would be. This was not the first time my family had tried to push me out of something I had built for myself, but it was going to be the last. The taxi ride home felt longer than the flight. The driver didn't speak much, which was fine with me. I kept my eyes on the blurred city lights outside the window, my phone still in my hand. The group chat sat open, my mother's last message shining on the screen. "You should start packing." Leah's thumbs-up reaction floated underneath it, small and smug. By the time we turned onto my street, the rain had slowed to a mist. The house came into view, its white paint glowing faintly under the streetlights. From the outside, it looked the same, but I could feel the weight of their intrusion pressing on it now. I paid the driver, rolled my suitcase to the porch, and unlocked the door. Inside, everything smelled faintly of Ethan's cologne. I had left it that way on purpose. The photo of us from our wedding day still sat on the hallway table. His coat still hung on the hook by the door. My mother's message replayed in my head as I walked through the living room. I knew exactly how they had done it. My father's will was likely straightforward, most of his assets to my mother, with a few sentimental pieces or small bequests to Leah and me. But my mother never liked fairness when it came to me. If she saw a way to cut me out, she took it. Leah would have been her ally in this. Together, they must have pushed my Uncle Paul, the executor, to redistribute property under the pretense that I didn't need it. The house had been bought in both Ethan's and my names, but my family had a history of finding loopholes. Years ago, after my grandmother's death, they convinced a cousin to sign away his share of her land for a fraction of its value. I was 20 at the time and had watched it happen, too young and powerless to stop it. Ethan had been the first person I told that story to. I remember him leaning back in his chair, studying me. "Then we make sure they can't do that to you," he had said. I set my suitcase in the bedroom and went to the kitchen. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Leah. "We're moving some of your things into storage tomorrow. Mom says you should make it easy on yourself." I stared at it for a long moment. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't respond. The worst part wasn't the theft itself. It was the way they assumed I would roll over. They counted on my grief, keeping me too tired to fight back. They didn't realize Ethan had already prepared me for this. Months before he got sick, he had made quiet arrangements, the kind that don't show up in casual searches or family gossip. I remembered the afternoon he told me about it. We were sitting in the backyard, the autumn light warm on our faces. "If anything ever happens to me, check the safe," he had said. "There's more than the usual stuff in there. The last document is the most important." I had laughed at him then, telling him not to be dramatic. He didn't smile back. "I'm serious, Claire. Just promise me you'll remember." After he died, I opened the safe and found what he meant. Among the insurance papers and our marriage certificate was a single-page legal document, notarized and signed, transferring ownership of the house to his closest friend, Michael Ward. Michael had been in Ethan's life since childhood. He had no ties to my family and no interest in selling the house unless I wanted to. Ethan had trusted him completely, and so did I. That document was dated after we purchased the house, but before Ethan's illness worsened. The copy my mother was holding in her photo must have been an outdated deed, pulled from somewhere in old county records. It looked legitimate, but it wasn't binding anymore. I could have called her right then and told her she was celebrating nothing. I could have sent a picture of the real deed and ended the game before it began, but that would have given her the satisfaction of seeing my reaction. I wanted them to walk right into the truth and feel it hit them all at once. The next day, I went about my routine. I made coffee, read through a stack of condolence cards from Ethan's friends, and started unpacking. By mid-afternoon, I saw a black SUV slow in front of the house. Leah was behind the wheel. She didn't stop, just drove by slowly, her eyes on the windows. I stayed in the kitchen, out of sight, and listened to the hum of the engine fade away. That evening, Uncle Paul called. His voice was uneasy. "Claire, I wanted to talk about the house situation." "There's no situation, Paul," I said evenly. "I just think you should come to the table. Your mother believes—" "I'm sure she does," I cut in. "And I'm sure she's convinced you of a lot of things. But the house isn't hers. It never will be." There was a long pause before he said, "I don't want to be in the middle of this." "You already are," I replied and hung up. That night, as I stood by the window, I could see the outline of my garden in the dark. The hydrangeas Ethan planted had survived the winter, their branches strong despite the cold. I thought about how he had protected me even when I didn't know I needed it, and how that protection was about to expose my family for exactly what they were. They believed they had taken something from me. In reality, they had taken nothing but the bait I had been willing to let them hold. The trap was already set, and all I had to do now was wait for them to step fully inside. 2 days passed before I heard from them again. I kept myself busy. I cleaned out the closet Ethan had been meaning to organize, went through a box of old photographs, and watered the garden. I wanted the house to feel like it belonged to us again before the storm hit. On the third morning, I woke to the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I peered through the curtains. Leah's SUV sat idling, and she was leaning against the hood with a phone in her hand. A moment later, another car arrived. My mother stepped out, dressed in a navy blazer and heels like she was attending a board meeting. She didn't even glance at the house before she walked toward the porch. I opened the door before she could knock. "Claire," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes, "we're here to go over the logistics. It will be easier if you start packing now." I leaned against the doorway. "Logistics for what?" "For moving out," she said plainly. "The will was clear, and Paul has already filed the necessary paperwork. This property is under my name now." I studied her face. She wasn't bluffing. She believed every word. Leah came up the steps holding a folder. "We even brought a copy of the deed for you so there's no confusion." She handed it to me. The paper was crisp, the ink official. My name wasn't on it. I flipped it over, then set it down on the small table by the door. "Noted," I said. "Anything else?" Leah's eyes narrowed. "You're awfully calm for someone losing her house." "That's because I'm not losing anything," I replied. My mother's smile faltered for the first time. "Denial isn't going to help you here, Claire." I stepped outside, letting the door swing shut behind me. "Do you remember the last time you pulled something like this? Grandma's land?" My mother stiffened. Leah shifted her weight but said nothing. "You convinced Cousin Alex to sign away his share for a fraction of what it was worth," I said, "and you laughed about it afterward." "That was different," my mother said quickly. "He didn't need the land." "And I don't need this house?" I asked. "You live alone now," she said. "It's too much space for you. This way you can start fresh." Start fresh. I'd heard that before. From her, from Leah, from every relative who thought they knew what my life should look like. "Leave," I said, my voice even. "I'm giving you the chance to walk away before this gets ugly." Leah scoffed. "You're bluffing. You have nothing. Paul says—" "I don't care what Paul says," I interrupted. "And if you're smart, you'll stop relying on him." My mother's eyes narrowed. "You can't scare us, Claire. We're not walking away from this." "Then you'll regret it," I said, and went back inside. The door clicked shut behind me. My heart was steady. They thought they had cornered me, but all they had done was step closer to the truth I was waiting to show them. After they left, I called Michael Ward. He picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said. "They showed up this morning," I told him, "with a fake deed." "That didn't take long," he said. "Do you want me to move up the timeline?" "Yes," I said. "Let's make this quick." We went over the plan. Michael would bring the current deed and meet me at the house in 3 days. He would also have the sheriff with him, just in case my family decided to make a scene. He wasn't worried about the legal side. Everything was airtight. But he wanted witnesses when the truth came out. Those 3 days felt long, but I kept my composure. I went to the grocery store, I tended to the garden, I even baked bread, the way Ethan used to on Sundays. Every ordinary act made me feel steadier, more prepared for what was coming. On the morning of the 3rd day, I woke early and cleaned the house from top to bottom. I opened the curtains, letting sunlight flood every room. If my family was going to walk in thinking they had won, I wanted them to see me standing in the middle of what they believed was theirs. At exactly noon, I heard engines outside. I looked through the window. 2 moving trucks were parked on the street. Leah was giving directions to the drivers while my mother stood on the sidewalk, her arms folded. A moment later, Michael's black pickup turned into the driveway. The sheriff's car followed. I stepped onto the porch as Michael got out, a folder in his hand. My mother noticed him immediately. "Who is this?" she asked. "This," I said, "is the person who owns this house." Leah laughed sharply. "Very funny." Michael didn't smile. He handed the folder to the sheriff, who glanced through it and nodded. "This is the current, legally binding deed," the sheriff said. "It names Michael Ward as the sole owner of the property, dated and notarized last year." My mother's face went pale. Leah's laughter died in her throat. Michael turned to me. "Ready for the rest?" I nodded. He pulled out another document. "As of this morning, I've transferred ownership back to Claire Benton Shaw. Full legal rights. No liens. No disputes." The sheriff stepped forward. "If you're not residents or invited guests, you need to leave now. Otherwise, it's trespassing." My mother stared at me, her mouth opening and closing without words. Leah's eyes darted between us, looking for a way to regain control, but there wasn't one. I stood there, calm and steady, watching them realize everything they had done was for nothing. The air between us was heavy. My mother's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse, as if holding onto it could keep her from losing control. Leah's eyes moved quickly, scanning the porch, the driveway, the street, anywhere but my face. The driver stood awkwardly by the moving trucks, clearly unsure if they should unload or leave. "Michael Ward?" my mother said finally, her voice thin. "I've never heard of you." "That's because I wasn't part of your plan," Michael replied calmly. "I was part of Ethan's. He wanted to make sure this house would always belong to Claire. So last year, he transferred it into my name, quietly, legally, permanently, until now." Leah stepped forward, her voice sharp. "That's ridiculous. We have the deed. Uncle Paul—" "The paper you have is worthless," Michael cut in. "An outdated copy. Looks official, but it's nothing more than a souvenir from when you thought you were clever." I crossed my arms. "You went to a will reading that had nothing to do with this property. You convinced yourselves it was yours because that's what you do. You take, you twist, you win by making other people lose, but not this time." The sheriff looked directly at my mother. "Ma'am, the legal documents are clear. If you remain here or attempt to remove property, it will be considered trespassing. I suggest you leave." Leah's cheeks flushed red. "We're family. She can't have us arrested." I stepped closer. "Family doesn't show up the day after a funeral to take someone's home. Family doesn't send pictures of stolen deeds while you're standing in an airport still grieving. You forfeited that word when you decided my loss was your opportunity." My mother's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. For the first time in years, she didn't have a ready insult. Michael handed me a pen. "Sign here," he said, pointing to the bottom of the transfer form. "This makes it official. The house is yours again." I signed without looking away from my mother. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper was louder than the murmurs from the drivers. When I was done, I passed the folder back to Michael. He slipped it into his bag and nodded to the sheriff. "All right, folks," the sheriff said to my mother and sister. "Time to move along." Leah's voice cracked. "We didn't do anything wrong." "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't think anyone would call you out for it." My mother adjusted her blazer, trying to recover her composure. "You'll regret making enemies of your own blood." "I regret ever letting my blood convince me I was powerless," I said. "That's over. She opened her mouth again, but the sheriff stepped in, motioning toward the sidewalk. "It's time to go." The drivers, sensing the outcome, began closing up the truck doors. Leah walked back to her SUV without another word. My mother followed, but she paused at the edge of the driveway. For a moment, she looked like she might turn around, might try one last time to twist the knife. Instead, she climbed into the passenger seat and they drove away. The street felt quieter once they were gone. Michael handed me the final folder with all the paperwork inside. "It's done," he said. "They can't touch it." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Ethan really thought of everything. "He did," Michael said. "He wanted you to have more than just the house. He wanted you to have the peace of knowing it couldn't be taken from you." I stepped back onto the porch, looking at the garden, the windows, the front door I had walked through 1,000 times. This wasn't just a structure. It was the life Ethan and I had built together, every board and brick holding a piece of us. Michael put a hand on my shoulder. "You're stronger than they think, Claire." I smiled, though my chest felt heavy. I think Ethan knew that before I did. The sheriff tipped his hat before leaving, his patrol car rolling slowly down the street. Michael stayed a moment longer, making sure I was all right before heading off. I watched his truck disappear around the corner, then turned back to the house. Inside, the air smelled faintly of the bread I had baked that morning. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, lighting up the table where Ethan and I had shared countless meals. For the first time since the airport, I felt my shoulders relax. I walked through each room slowly, touching the backs of chairs, running my hand along the walls. I stopped in the living room, where Ethan's coat still hung on the hook. I didn't move it. I didn't need to. This was still our home, and now it was safe. The phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but we're not finished." I deleted it without replying. The real victory wasn't in keeping the house. It was in knowing I no longer needed their approval, their acceptance, or their version of family. They could try again, but I would never be caught off guard. Not after this. I went to the back door and stepped into the garden. The hydrangeas were beginning to bloom, their pale blue flowers opening toward the sun. I thought about how Ethan had planted them for me, telling me they would come back stronger each year. He had been right. I stood there for a long time, letting the quiet settle in. The fight was over, the house was mine, and so was my freedom from them. The house was silent again, but it no longer felt like the kind of silence that weighed me down. It was the kind of quiet that came after a storm when the air feels cleaner, sharper. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder of legal documents in front of me, and read through them one more time. My name was printed clearly, without question. No one could touch this place now. I thought about Ethan. He had always known my family's patterns, the way they circled like vultures around anything of value. He had warned me without making me live in fear. His protection was never loud or controlling. It was steady, like a hand on my back guiding me forward. Even in death, he had found a way to keep me safe. The anger I had felt at the airport had faded. It was replaced by something quieter, but stronger. Certainty. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need their approval, their presence, or their version of what my life should be. I had spent years trying to keep some fragile bridge standing between us, but all it had done was give them easier access to hurt me. Now the bridge was gone, and I didn't regret burning it. I walked through the house, not in sadness, but in ownership. I ran my fingers along the wooden banister Ethan had sanded smooth. I paused in the living room, looking at the worn spot on the couch where he used to sit with his morning coffee. This house was a piece of him, and keeping it wasn't about money or winning. It was about holding on to the life we had built together. In the garden, the hydrangeas were blooming brighter than I had ever seen. I knelt to touch the petals, remembering how Ethan had planted them with his bare hands. He told me they would return stronger each year, and now I understood what he meant. Strength isn't about never being hurt. It's about coming back after you are. I knew my family would try again in some way. That's who they were. But they would never catch me unprepared. They had already shown me their sharpest teeth, and I had walked away with everything that mattered. When I went back inside, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat down at the table. I didn't rush. I let myself enjoy it, knowing the day was mine to decide. No one was coming to take it away. This wasn't just a story about keeping a house. It was a story about refusing to be erased. It was about understanding that family is not defined by shared blood, but by shared loyalty, respect, and care. My mother and sister had none of those things for me, and that was fine, because I had them for myself. Ethan had given me more than a safe place to live. He had given me the strength to claim what was mine without apology. That was the real inheritance. If you've ever faced something like this, someone trying to take what's yours when you were at your most vulnerable, share your story in the comments. I want to hear how you handled it and what you learned from it. If this story resonated with you, like the video, share it with someone who might need the reminder, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of strength, survival, and standing your ground.